So I'm Eric Huffy, as many of you might know in the Valley. Moms, God love them on earth as it is in heaven. Leanne was the mother to my two oldest, dearest friends, Leslie and Evan, and is a second mom to me. I remember the first time that I ever drank too much. It wasn't alcohol. It was 1977, and the Broncos were going to the Super Bowl on the backs of their defense, the Orange Crush. And Leanne bought us a case of Orange Crush to celebrate it. Now, might not be advisable as a parent to give kids a case of orange fizzy pop, but Leanne didn't see the world that way. She saw it with kids, I felt, through the eyes of kids, what drove their passion, and that was perhaps the greatest moment, at least in this Colorado kid's life. And so, I just loved that about her, and I saw it in the way she was with her children early on, supporting Leslie in her horseback riding and letting Evan pop pistols and drive motorcycles just a few years after being potty trained. and then we would come up and we'd be able to share that with them. And then, I remember a big furry dog about shoulder high. I can't remember his name, but he would grab me by the wrist softly in his jaws, and we'd be led into the Eustace house, and we'd be fed good food, and we would later on that night maybe go up on the porch and put the hi-fi stereo out on the porch and play an album of wolves howling and try to listen for the wolves at the refuge over a few hills reverberate. It was good to be a kid in the Eustace house. And as time went on and, George passed, it didn't seem that Leanne skipped a beat in her passion for trying to find things inspirational with her children. She supported Leslie going to pursue arts and theater in New York, and she found Evan the finest jazz bass player she could find so she could teach him how to play damn good rock and roll. And later on, as some of you may know, my brothers and I, we struggled through alcoholism and drug addiction, and what I want to tell you is that when you're in that dark and turbulent sea, you still take notice. And there were those that turned their back and went dark, and I probably deserved that. There were those that shook their fists and pointed their fingers like a craggy cliff on the shore's edge, and I probably deserved that. And there were those that just stood there and waited me out, loved me unconditionally, and those were like my mother here and like Leanne. And they were the lighthouse, and they were the ones that showed me where the shore was. And that's why I'm alive here today. And I moved on, I got well, moved out of the valley. I don't know how closely those two are related, but and so I didn't see her that often, but I was really close with Evan at that time. I was living in the Bay Area, and we were good friends and doing things like surfing together and just spending time with one another. And Leanne came out to visit, and we went for a walk at the Albany Dog Park, which is it's an old landfill that they turned into a place where you could walk your dogs. There's big chunks of concrete with graffiti, and you see the cityscape in the back, and it's just a perfect place to be with a couple of Eustaces. Leanne came up to me and she gave me a hug. Lovey, she said, and then she held my hand in the soft palms of her hands, and she looked at me and her eyes gleamed, and she gave that big smile. And I assure you that if you want that smile today, you need to go no further than Leslie over there in the corner, because I see it in her. I see Leanne and her all the time. But then she went on to say, I understand that your nephew is going to be going to kayak school and kayaking the Zambezi in Africa. And I'd say, yeah, I understand that to be true. And she would say, and I understand that your sister will be sea kayaking up in Alaska. And I'd say, yeah, I understand that to be true. And then she would say, and I understand your brother Ian will be casting for redfish in the Redneck Riviera. And I would think to myself, I'd say, well, I probably should know that. And I'd just kind of nod and act like I could understand. And then I'd get worried that the next thing she'd say is, and I understand, Eric, you are, and I would not know yet what it was that I had done. Because she cared so much about people, and she always, she looked into me with that smile, and I could tell that the lights were on. She was receiving me, and she was learning about me, and she was loving me, and she would share that with other people she loved. And she did that with my family and my siblings. And now I'm older. I have kids. I have grandkids. And I think about what it means to be a parent. And I think I wish most that my kids become good citizens of the world, that they have generous hearts, that they extract all the juices they can out of this fruitful but very, very short life. And I had a chance a few years back to spend 3 weeks with Leslie and Evan, and we trekked to Nepal, 3 kids grown old. And we were hoping to see the Himalayas, and it rained most of the time. It was foggy, and we hiked those trails, having to look at the path that we were on and the villages that were around us and look within. And we had a wonderful time. And we would see a glimpse of a peak, and we would just, we'd hug and, here we are in the Himalayas. And it ended with a celebration when we were with like 10 Nepalese, and they had this Mustang whiskey in an apple jar, and they drank that. We didn't partake, but they played these folk songs, and they had drums, and they beat drums. And Evan was a good enough musician to understand how to place chords, so he learned that on his mandolin, and I learned it on the guitar. And it wasn't raining. It was 12,000 feet, and we were all bundled in our jackets, and we were all 10 feet tall compared to the Nepalese, and bouncing around and dancing, and Leslie was singing most beautifully and dancing most beautifully and being the most beautiful and the belle of the ball, and maybe because she was the only female there, but everybody loved Leslie. I have in my mind's eye just the seeing these guys laughing and that smile and playing their music and dancing and bouncing around these people and being with them and generous and pursuing that adventure with me, and I can't help but to think that and I'm certain that none of that would be true if it wasn't for this woman standing next to me and for Leanne Eustace, because that's what they inspired in all of us. And so I'd just like to close by thanking Leanne first and foremost for leaving behind for me such wonderful friends in Leslie and Evan, and being such a wonderful second mother to me, and I'm sure to many of you. So thank you.
I'm Judy Strang, and I'm going to introduce this song while we get the band set up. It's called Odometer, and it's based on a poem that was written by a young man named William, whose last name I don't remember, so I can't give him full credit for the poem. I knew him in my 20s in Richmond, Virginia. But I thought, since this is about words and about the act of speaking, it seemed suitable for this occasion, since Leanne was someone who loved to talk. Mostly what I shared with Leanne was music and conversation. The poem refers to a literal separation, one that feels like a wrenching apart, but it more broadly concerns the act of letting go of a place or of a person that we love. Loving, then losing, stirs the human capacity to recognize what we carry inside us, not memories, but pieces gathered from each meaningful place, each human connection as we move through time, everything touching everything. When I was here last summer, Leanne's time for conversation was over, so I'd bring my guitar whenever I went to visit her. Odometer, this song, was one of her favorites. I don't know why, and she wasn't able to tell me. There were often other people in the circle with us singing, and I would give her a lyric sheet and she would follow along with the words and the music. I believe music, the act of hearing it, playing it, participating in it, being affected by it, has a magic that defies time and distance. It's inside us, between us, and around us all at once. And that's why I made this poem into a song decades ago, and that's what Leanne would remind me every time we sang together. Because words inside music help us travel through pain and loss, so we can remember it again or recognize for the first time what we keep.
I'm Ravi Venkateswaran, CRMS class of '69, and also currently a serving trustee at the school here. Like Eric, I too have been also a great beneficiary of Leanne Smiles over the years. Like all of us here, I'm so pleased to be back here to remember Leanne in Carbondale, the place and the valley that were so dear to her and central to her life all these many years. I'm thankful to Leslie and Evan for this privilege to share some thoughts about someone we all loved and who was such an important part of our lives in some form or manner. My time with Leanne started here with my appearance on the CRMS campus the summer of 1967 attending summer school and followed by 2 years as a student here. Leanne, along with George and Evan and Leslie, were living in the dorm and were my dorm parents for 1 year. As my parents had returned to India during this period, I was a ward of the school, which Leanne was aware of. From the beginning, Leanne was always supportive, positive in ensuring that I was okay as I found the assimilation process into a CRMS education challenging. I'm sure that my fellow dorm residents would attest that Leanne was there for them as well. She was very generous with her time, and I remember being with the Eustace family in their living room with interesting conversations on a range of subjects. She always challenged us. I stayed in the Valley for the 2 years that I was a student here, and subsequently had many occasions to visit and share meals with the Eustace family in their house on Missouri Heights. Leanne was always a wonderful and gracious host. I grew to admire and look up to Leanne for her openness, warmth, affection, and kindness. As my former dorm roommate Scott simply said, Leanne had a good heart. When I graduated from CRMS, there was a real deep sense of sadness in me, primarily because I had to leave people like Leanne and others here in the Valley who were so important to my experience here. And it's kind of an experience that I've never had really since during that time. It was such an intense and immersive experience of being people like Leanne that it was just, it was a truly memorable experience. And I was very grateful that I had, during these life-changing 2 years with Leanne, George, Adele, and many others, wonderful people from that time at the school, and it's always stayed with me subsequent from that time. After I left CRMS, my studies on the East Coast and career took me far away, and I pretty much lost complete touch with CRMS. I spent many years working outside the country in India and then in Africa. It was only in 2014, after I had moved back to the U.S., to Seattle upon my retirement, I met with Jeff Leahy, our head of school, who asked me to become a trustee. I thought that this was not only an opportunity to give back to the school, but also to reconnect with Leanne, Adele, and others from my time. And Leanne was a very long-time board member of CRMS during that period. I remember that when I first came as a guest to the board meeting, I was very excited to reconnect with Leanne. She inquired about what I had been doing and was pleased that I was joining the board. She encouraged me to stay with her whenever I was in town for board meetings, and I did so on many occasions during these past several years. I will always cherish these visits. It just seemed like there was no 40-year-odd gap between then, when she was a dorm mother to a young student, and now as a fellow board member, friend, and mentor. As everyone knows here, Leanne had an extraordinary range of interests and commitments in the Valley. We always used to have discussions on many things: CRMS, my experience of working in Africa, her local activities, and of course about our families. She was extremely devoted to the school and of course to her children. She was always insightful, frank, and clear in her thoughts. When I expressed my nervousness in becoming a board member, since I, as an alum, wanted to represent the school well, she just said, I know you and you'll be fine. That was Leanne. I asked Leanne about how she coped with life as a single parent after losing George relatively early. She just responded that she had to be there for her family, and she was, and that life's responsibilities had to be met That, of course, not only extended to her family, but all those many other activities which have been talked about here in the Valley. There was never any doubt that she would continue to stay in the Valley. She was true to her words and lived her life at a full and frenetic pace with many, many activities, almost till the end. She was there for me with words of deep consolation when my wife passed away 3 years ago, prior to our CRMS class of 69 50th reunion, which was in 2019. We were happy to have Leanne there with us, and many of my classmates shared their own Leanne stories of friendship. Though we are sad that Leanne is no longer with us, we cannot but celebrate her long and productive life and everything that she accomplished during her years in the Valley. I will cite a shloka or verse from the Indian Hindu Upanishads, which roughly says, "Where there's joy, there's creation. Where there's no joy, there's no creation. Know the nature of joy." Well, I think we can all affirmatively say that Leanne indeed knew the nature of joy, and brought friendship, meaning, and love to all of us who are privileged to know her. CRMS is so much a better place for the many years she was involved with the school. The Valley and the many organizations that she was active with and benefited from her wisdom and enthusiasm are better. Her many, many friends, including those here, will know that she was there for them as a loyal friend. Her children, Leslie and Evan, know that their mother was always there for them. We are all better for having had Leanne in our lives. I think that in itself is a fitting epitaph for this remarkable and wonderful woman. Though we will miss her, I don't think we will ever forget her. Thank you.